Now, we all want flourishing societies in Africa, and we know that given the demography, well, that's going to require jobs for the masses. And we know that only industrialization will deliver masses of jobs, and we all agree, I think, that without cheap, reliable power, industrialization is just another consultant's report gathering dust on the shelf. And we mostly agree that gas is probably the quickest route to delivering power without choking our planet to death. So how do we balance? How do we balance the production of gas for export versus gas for domestic consumption? How do we create a flourishing domestic energy sector on the continent? Let's ask our distinguished panel. No disrespect to consultants, by the way. Some of my best friends are consultants. My name is Nicholas Norbrook. I'm the managing editor of the Africa Report. We're part of the Jeune Afrique Media Group. Jeune Afrique Media Group puts on the Africa CEO Forum. I'm spelling it out, as every year we have people who are not aware of the link. The Africa Report is so much more than just Jeune Afrique in French. It's your gateway to Anglophone Africa. It's the best of Francophone, Lusophone, and Arab-speaking Africa thrown in. TheAfricaReport.com for details. Now let's meet this glittering panel, whose intellectual heft is matched only by their operational effectiveness. These are the doers here before you, ladies and gentlemen, the people who get things done. Nina Brigitte-Koch, the Senior Vice President Africa for the Norwegian oil and gas company Equinor. Ibrahim Yakubu, Minister of State, Ministry of Energy and Renewable Energies, the Republic of Niger. Ronan Huitric, the Vice President, Business Development LNG for French major Total Energy. Lekan Akinyanmi, CEO of Lekoil Nigeria Limited. And Simbi Kisei Waboti, the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Content Development and Monitoring Board.
So do not worry, we will have to address that again.
Been thrown down about domestic gas projects happening on the continent. What for you have been the financing hurdles that you might have faced in Nigeria? And more broadly, how can we accelerate investment into the sector?
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to talk about the whole spectrum, because really in this business we're all dependent on geology as well as financing. So what do I mean? Within Lekoil we have our Otakipo field, which is land-based, close to shore, and we actually just started our gas project just a couple of weeks ago. So it's a smaller project in terms of size, but at the end of the day, the LPG that is coming from it, the gas that is going to our 6 megawatt power plant, that is all local. But in financing it, because we had the oil project, it was easy for us to use the oil to fund the gas locally. If we wanted to fund it standalone, it would have been difficult because it's a Naira project. And you need Naira financing for a Naira project. If you take dollars to do Naira, unless you have a hedge, then the delta on your currency risk is actually bigger than your profit. In other words, you could be wiped out. Now, on the flip side, we have an offshore asset, OGO, which is 3 TCF. That asset lends itself to export, LNG. If we said, okay, you know what, if somebody offered us all the financing and so on, and by the way, as my fellow panelists will say, on LNG, you need to lock in a contract for 15 years minimum, 25 years maximum. It could be TTM, it could be an S-curve based on Brent, but you will need to commit the gas and commit to the contract 15 years ahead of time. You don't know what's going to happen in 15 years. Now, if you said, oh, I want to bring the gas onshore, well, you're going to have a problem because the industry is just not developed or developing fast enough to use the gas. And to the extent that it's an asset that has a lot of condensate, if you're not taking the gas, then you can't produce the liquids. Then you can't fund the project. So in a way, geography and financing has helped us to make it easy to say, this is for offshore, this is for onshore. Hope that helps you.
Fantastic. Lekan, on this issue of how we can help develop downstream gas usage on the continent, How can we aggregate and then finance the demand? Is it possible to use the sovereign rating of a state to give comfort to investors? Would there be enough demand to service if we could just de-risk some of these projects as we've been talking about?
Yeah, Nicholas, those are some of the ideas, but I think we need to look at it in a more fundamental manner. If you just look at the demographics of the continent and the consumption, there's a clear mismatch between what we consume and what we produce. In fact, we're producing very little. Part of the reason, and Tanzania is great, but part of the reason is that power is either not steady or not cheap enough. So to the extent that we can come up with these ideas of industrial parks where we can, because we have the gas, industrial parks where we can guarantee a particular price and just steady availability of power, we can start producing. And I'm not talking about big things. I'm talking about simple, basic stuff that we use day in, day out, that we're buying from different parts of the world. And that's where, to the extent that we do that, then the government, and it's only the government, we have to be intentional about this, is the government that can pull something like that together on a scale that is large enough to make a difference. And then the government can put their rating behind it. They can get, if it's an IFC project, they can put their rating behind it. But there has to be some intentionality if we are going to compete, in terms of just manufacturing basic things and fulfilling part of our own demand. And then once you start that, hopefully it starts a cycle, and then that demand starts to grow. But there has to be a purposeful plan to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to be, doing the same thing we've been doing for years.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you have questions? A question here? Anyone else? I'll come among you. I've got plenty more questions for the panelists, but I'd like to get to you first. Sir. Please give us your name and also who you'd like to address the question to.
Good morning. My name is, sorry for my throat. My name is Mohamed Mokhtar from the National Bank of Mauritania. My first question is aimed at our Nigerian brother. We talk a lot about the pipeline between Morocco and Algeria. Morocco and Nigeria. But there's also another project between Algeria and Nigeria. So does it really make sense for Morocco to have such project when in Mauritania and Senegal we have a huge potential offshore, and we can team up with our neighbor in Morocco and kick out a project that will leave Algeria, which has maybe more capacity. It has more money, it has gas, and the pipeline going to Algeria could divert the disputed territory of Western Sahara. So does it make more sense for the Algeria-Nigeria project, or can they both take place? My last question is related to local content. We hear a lot about local content from our foreign partners, but if we look deep at the local content, we realize that it's often sugar coating. It's really peanuts. Wouldn't it be more reasonable for our government to get involved and have in their economic strategy real local content and not be dictated by foreign partner, which is often just sugar coating and window dressing? Sorry for my...
Thank you very much for those pertinent questions. Cindy, do you want to take the local content one? And then,
yes,
and then
I will. I will not venture into the pipeline issue.
The loaded one on
it's
pipeline.
It's beyond my pay grade when I look at the geopolitical context. But on the local content issue, I think it's not, for us in Nigeria, it's not sugar coating. I don't know if you've been to Nigeria before, but we have a law. It is a law. It is a legal requirement. In most of those countries where it is sugar coating, is either a policy or a regulation that is not enforceable in the court of law. So Nigeria didn't want to sugarcoat it. In 2010, they passed a law which mandates every operating company, they don't dictate for us. We dictate for them how they will do business in Nigeria because it is law. And I'm sure you know in your country, if you go against the law, the penalty associated with it. True to type, when we started local content in 2010, like I said, the Nigerian participation in a $21 billion year-on-year spend was less than 5%. Yeah, because we didn't have the expertise, not enough capacity to undertake what is required in the oil and gas industry without compromising safety and standards. But today, as I speak to you, Nigeria, we've ramped it up to 54% in terms of local participation. In the land and swamp area of the Nigerian business, 99% of the contracts associated with land and swamp are given to Nigerians because that's what the law says. The international companies play ole in the deep offshore arena because they have the technology, they have the deep pocket. Today, I can also tell you that most of the international companies, be it Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker, are all managed by Nigerians as the managing director, the directors of those companies. The Train 7 or NLNG project in Nigeria, when it started, when I was in Shell, it was 10% Nigerians and 90% expats. Today, it is 90% Nigeria, 10% expats. So to tell you that we have not sugar-coated anything in Nigeria, my advice is that it would be nice to come over to Nigeria to study what we have done for the past 10 years and the achievements we've made. Just the last point. Out of the $21 billion year-on-year spend, we've been able to retain $11 billion in country as the Nigerian content requirement in most of the projects. Thank you. My first question is too political for me to...
No, I'm going to ask
well, let me...
to throw himself,
Lekan can take
throw himself on the hand grenade of that question.
Well, thank you. If my executive secretary said it's too political, definitely we're treading into some interesting waters here. But before then, I just wanted to acknowledge that Lekoil also is a Nigerian local content success story. We're an E&P company. We have 4 assets. We have an onshore asset doing close to 10,000 barrels a day. We have 2 assets in appraisal, and we have a deep water exploration, and we're all Nigerian staff, all local content. So just to, again, we're a product of what the ES has said. On the first question, it's not my area of expertise, but this is what I would say. In a previous life, I did have a chance to invest widely in the industry. And we invested in companies in the US like Williams and Enterprise. These are companies that manage pipelines. And sometimes these pipelines are almost parallel. They're so close. You have pipelines going to Texas, going to Louisiana right next door. At the end of the day, each project has to be looked at standalone and just see if it makes sense to the people that are investing in it, just in terms of on a numbers perspective. If it makes sense, then they should go ahead with it. And if it doesn't, then really, does somebody want to subsidize that? Does the government want to subsidize their national interest? And if they want to, then they can still coexist. If they don't, then it is what it is. That's the best I can do here.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. The organizers, do we have time for one more question? No, I'm being told not. In which case, I still would like to ask... We do? Oh, fantastic. Okay. Gentleman over here.
Only if it is a nice question.
Nice personal question.
Not too political, please.
Okay, it will be a highly technical question. So my question is directed to the 2 gentlemen that spoke last, the executive secretary. Where is the local content in LNG in Nigeria? My name is Yusuf Binji. I'm the managing director of Boa Cement. We have 2 cement plants located in Nigeria, one in the northwestern part, very far away from natural gas pipeline. My manufacturing facility, we have invested over $2 billion. It is 1,000 kilometers away from the nearest gas pipeline. In the name of sustainability, we converted our generators from using heavy fuel oil to LNG. And we use the virtual pipeline. So I will help you out. We transport LNG from Port Harcourt to Sokoto over 1,000 kilometers in cryogenic trucks carrying LNG at minus 160 degrees Celsius. And every day I have to transport 20 tankers to my factory in Sokoto. We have not seen the local content in domestic LNG production. Secondly, also to Lekan, as we are preparing for LNG export, also look domestically. A lot of industries are using LNG. On my site alone, I generate 220 megawatts of electricity using LNG. So, but I'm still short of LNG. There is only one company in Nigeria doing it, and it is not owned by Nigerians. They have a monopoly. Nobody now is currently building physically. Maybe others have announced intentions, but they are not building. It's only a company called Greenville Nigeria Limited that is doing the LNG, and they are the sole supplier to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right, if I'm permitted to address the local content bit, maybe just to put in context, local content does not mean that if you are an international company, you cannot invest in the country. The actual definition of local content is the domiciliation and domestication of value-add activities in the country. Yeah, so even if you are an international investor, so long as you domicile the business in country, you are able to employ Nigerians, you are able to participate in the domestic market, it is local content. Now, giving you a context of LNG, yes, Greenfield is invested in Nigeria, producing LNG through virtual pipeline that they supply you. And as you are aware, to tackle that today, the Nigerian government is investing in the construction of the AKK pipeline, which of course will bring gas from the south up onto the north, the border with Niger, Katsina itself. That's the AKK pipeline, how it goes. When that happens in terms of infrastructure, then it will be able to supply you with LNG. Talking about LNG production, the Nigerian LNG, in terms of LPG, all the entire LPG of about 450,000 metric tons that is produced is infused into the domestic market. It used to be exported, but sometime last year or 2 years ago, the government came up with that policy and said you have to supply the entire LNG market, the entire LNG production into the Nigerian market. That in itself is also local content. And like I said, LNG today, the Nigerian LNG today is managed predominantly by Nigeria. It's also local content. There are pockets of LNG plants that have been developed. New Cross, Pan-Ocean have developed LNG plants with which they are also supplying the domestic LNG markets. There are other projects in the pipeline to meet up the local LNG demand and supply. Don't forget, when Nigeria declared a decade of gas some 2-3 years ago, the LNG consumption in Nigeria was even lower. LPG consumption in Nigeria was lower than that of Ghana and Senegal. But today, we have gone from 250,000 metric tons to 1 million metric tons of LPG consumption, and that is growing. And once we add the Train 7, it's going to enhance our LPG construction in the country. As NCDMB, we are also investing with local partners to produce about 250,000 metric tons of LPG in the country, which of course, like you know, gas projects don't come overnight. There will be commitment. So it is growing. It has not gone to Sokoto where you are because like you know, in the geography of Nigeria, the oil and gas sector is within the southern region. And that's why the AKK pipeline is being constructed. That's why Greenville saw an opportunity to invest in an LPG plant to be able to use virtual pipeline to distribute LPG in the country. So it is a process, a lot of local content involvement. Most of the plants that are being built are owned by Nigerians, and they are going to be operated by Nigeria in the LPG space. I sympathize with you, but what I can assure you, give some time. Sokoto, for those who do not know, is on the far left corner of Nigeria, 1,000 kilometers from where you discover oil and gas. But the process is going on, and I think we'll get there in the shortest possible time.
Thank you. Thank you. Lekan.
Yes, thank you. From a perspective of who owns LNG, we actually at Lekoil right now, we have on the drawing board, and I was just discussing it with our ES, we have 10 million tons per annum project. It's still going through pre-FID. We hope to take FID next year. But that's primarily for export. Now, to the extent, because from some of our inland, more inland assets, to the extent that there is a very clear offtake agreement, multi-year offtake agreement, then we're happy to look at supplying you with LNG, because then it's just a mini LNG projects can be done very quickly. So it's something to discuss offline if you want to take it further.
Thanks, Lekan. Panel. Stay tuned. Very shortly, we'll have a very interesting conversation about sustainable development, gas usage, energy, between two leading lights on the subject. Thank you very much.